Hello there. Welcome back to the channel and another Versus episode in this ongoing series of mine we have here. The ground rules of this series, if you're new to it, it can be any faction from any universe posed against another faction from any universe, because I thought that'd be more interesting than just doing within the same universe. This particular one, we're crossing the Star Trek universe with the Farscape universe. And our matchup today is the Teran Empire from the Mirror Universe, ironically, and the Scaran Empire, one of the big bads of the Farscape universe. Before we get into the matchup, please like, share and subscribe. Comment down below your thoughts on this particular matchup and who do you think will actually come out on top, and do you agree or disagree with my conclusion? Bear in mind, it's all fun. It's just my opinion. You can have yours. It can be different. That's all good. With that out of the way, let's get into the first of these two. Okay, so a quick breakdown of the two factions. We'll start with the Scarrans. The Scarrans are a bipedal humanoid species that run a vast and extremely powerful empire that's the primary rival of peacekeeperdom within the Farscape universe. One of its main attributes is that it's a lot more aggressive, militaristic and oppressive than the peacekeepers, a bit like the Terrans in a way. The Scarrans themselves physically are almost shark-like in appearance when we first meet them, but we do learn that there is variety within their species, although that variety is never overly explained. There are males and females. They are very large and have some form of mental probing capability, a very ill-defined form of telepathy, as well as a heat gland located in their chest somewhere around here, which allows them to project sort of a thermal energy from their hands that can break someone down and burn them, basically forcing them to comply to the Scarran's wishes. In addition to that, they are known to have extremely thick and sturdy hides. They are very difficult to injure and are extremely durable with great redundancy in their bodies. They have sharp teeth and some claws and are an innately aggressive species. In terms of their technological capabilities, the principal vessel in their arsenal is the Scaran Dreadnought, this incredibly large, heavily armed, all big gun ship, very much earning its name Dreadnought, which, for historical context from Earth, a dreadnought is a type of warship originally developed in the early 20th century, which was designed to outclass all other cruisers and battle cruisers and warships afloat on the surface at the time by replacing all the smaller and mid-caliber guns with sheer overwhelming battery force. These vessels are extremely good for destroying other naval assets, whether they be other warships or, say, fuel tankers and civilian cargo vessels at greater range than the enemy was able to project fire back. Once through them, they were also pretty handy when taking on coastal bombardment roles during invasions. Dreadnoughts are no joke, and the Scarrans, with their culture, they typify this overwhelming mentality. They are not known for their diplomatic skills and are often seen as something of a lowbrow member when at the diplomatic table and not very well respected, as often stated by their emperor. Their emperor would actually like to have this kind of respect from the other races, that he could be seen as an intellectual, not just a brute, but that's simply not how the Scarrans are seen or how they conduct themselves. They are known to use underhanded tactics where necessary, but for the most part their race rely on brute force, and a status quo of mutually assured destruction is maintained between the Peacekeepers and the Scarrans. The Scarrans view Peacekeepers, which are a near-human species, to be inferior in every way, not even good as breeding stock, and yes, that is their own words. They, as a result of this, view the Sebaceans, who are the Peacekeepers overall, as so inferior and useless that their plan is to just wipe them out without any kind of remnant left over. Their overall technological capabilities are similar to those of the Peacekeepers. Their vessels lack shielding, as shields are not particularly common in this universe, but they are incredibly heavily armoured. They are typically escorted by numerous small vessels and carry fighters. The Emperor's personal ship, as they are ruled by an Emperor and a sort of council of some kind, is a vessel known as a Decimator, or extremely heavily customized version. As well as, again, there are smaller corvettes and other escort vessels that travel alongside the dreadnoughts, as the dreadnoughts' primary weapon are just the big guns. These ships are twice the size of a Sebastian command carrier, and basically these things are similar to a Star Destroyer. They are just gigantic weapons platforms cruising around in space waiting for something to destroy. And the Scarans are more than willing and able to actually unleash that immense firepower upon any target, whether it be another starship or a planetary target. And that is the Scarans in a nutshell. As for the Terrans, Terrans are a human race who went on to create a very large, brutal, and human-centric empire. They can be inclusive of races they don't deem completely subhuman, races such as Andorians, even Vulcans to a degree, but humans are the principal race of the empire, seeing themselves not necessarily as superior, like the Scarans view themselves to others, but certainly more important than the other races. Like the Scarans, they are ruled by an emperor, and other than that, physiologically they're human. And again, if you're not too familiar with humans, they're bipedal, they're roughly our size, similar weight and strength capabilities, but the Terrans culturally make up for any shortcomings versus a Scaran, say, with sheer aggression. Unlike traditional human cultures which the Scarans might encounter or are encountered in other universes, Terrans are innately violent. They're extremely untrustworthy, they are known for their manipulations, they are known for being extremely treacherous, and also very aggressive and barbaric. Similar to the Scarans, they are not seen as particularly good at the diplomatic tables. They can't often be taken at their word. Terrans sort of value strength and power above all else. Constant scheming against one another and other alien races that they are conquering is considered positive attributes in their culture. Kind of. Terrans don't value home and family as much as they do personal wealth and glory. The Empire is ruled ultimately by an emperor, a high council of sorts, a sort of council of lords, a senate, and other bureaucratic government structures. Its principal military fleet is the Imperial Starfleet. This is made up of a vast assortment of powerful warships armed with a dazzling array of different weapons varying from the humble phaser and standard torpedo right the way through to weapons of mass destruction based on technology derived from extra-dimensional sources, capable of laying waste to entire planets we have seen in the blink of an eye. Terrans also possess other technologies the Scarans do not have, such as transporters and shields. And it has been demonstrated that some of their ships do utilize some kind of stealth capability, as well as even cloaking devices, but cloaking devices are very rare in that universe and not considered necessarily tactically useful, which is something I might explore in a future video, why the Mirror Universe doesn't have cloaking devices, or at least not widely. Let me know in the comments if that's a video you'd like to see. And other than that, we have to assume, as always, that these two powers can harm one another. Now, I've explored the Teran Empire in great detail in other playlists that hopefully I've remembered to link, but the short nutshell version, they're very violent. Their empire is not unlike that of ancient Rome in the way that it is organized and administrated, and is probably a descendant of said empire, happened to survive into the modern era of the 23rd century. Starfleet is the sword of this brutal empire, which has enough aggression, ships, and personnel to force humanity's will on an entire quadrant. So let's figure out how these two powers would go against one another. It's not hard to imagine what would happen if these two alien races encountered one another. A Terran expeditionary force, I think, would be the most likely first encountering point. Scarans are not big on exploration. Terrans, at least, are constantly interested in expansionism. When the Scarans would first encounter the Terrans, what they would see is they would basically see Sebastians, as Sebastians and humans look the same. They quickly realize, though, these are not the same race, but are very, very similar in a lot of their attributes. The only difference being, Terrans are a lot less trustworthy than your average Sebastian. It would be an instant aggressive fight. The Terrans would see a Scaran dreadnought, another battle group or planetary defense net that they would run into as an immediate threat. The Terrans would attack because, quite frankly, that's how both of these powers operate. Terrans often rush in aggressively, mostly wanting to test this new enemy that they're encountering. They would see the size of a Scaran physically and know based on the disposition of their forces and the sheer firepower that their vessels possess, that this is an enemy that they're not going to take lightly. Anyone who can build and field ships like this is going to have a navy to reckon with and an army to boot. So the Terrans would want to hit them fast and hit them hard, a blitzkrieg style attack. This initial battle, my feeling would be, it would go to the Terrans, as Scarans often move in small groups, and the Terrans, they're kind of sneaky. They'd sneak up on the Scaran vessels before they had a chance to fully react, and although extremely powerful weapons that I would imagine the individual energy cannons carried aboard the Scaran dreadnoughts would outclass any of the conventional armaments of a standard Terran warship, I would not underestimate the average Terran vessel. We're going to look at a small flotilla of Terran ships here against a small flotilla of Scaran vessels, with the Terrans having the element of surprise. This initial battle is going to go to the Terrans. They are going to annihilate the Scarans. The Scaran High Command and the Emperor are going to learn of the attack, and now further incursions by this new hostile enemy that they may initially confuse to be Sebacean, but will quickly realise they are not Sebacean, they are something else. So, with these two universes colliding, the Scarans will redistribute their forces to engage this new enemy. The Terrans will meet stiff resistance as they begin to try to engage Scaran-controlled worlds, but Scarans are exceptionally good defensive armourers. Scaran and Terran vessels, although both capable of FTL flight, although it's not entirely clear exactly how FTL works for the Scarans, I don't think the Scarans have an advantage or a disadvantage when it comes to FTL. I'm going to say these two powers are probably similar. There might be a slight edge to the Terrans for maybe speed, a little bit, but I don't think so, because at least not a significant one. So in terms of that, the Terrans are not running rings around the Scarans, and their fleet numbers are probably fairly damn similar. The Scarans by this point, within days of this war starting up, will have been able to mobilise a fleet, as the Scarans were demonstrated on numerous occasions to be able to mobilise their assets very quickly. Something they would quickly do against the Terrans and retaliate hard. The Terrans would have spread themselves out to try to attack multiple Scaran targets simultaneously, but Scarans will easily sacrifice territory to gain a tactical victory, something the Terrans will learn to their detriment. The Scarans will hit the Terrans hard at their centre. They'll break the Terran lines and force them to both sides into an immediate stalemate with one another, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other and push deeper into the other's territory. The Scarans will start to gain ground at various lightly defended Imperial outposts of the Teran Empire. While the Imperial Starfleet is off raiding and assaulting Scaran worlds and shipping lanes and supply lines, the Scarans will be using their heavy dreadnoughts to simply annihilate and pulverise Terran bases. Terrans, however, have a slightly more integrated empire than the Scarans, and although the Scarans can pull on vast resources as well, just like the Terrans can, it's likely that the Terrans will mobilise additional auxiliary units from their empire, as we see that Starfleet does integrate Andorians, Tellarites, Vulcans, Rigelians, you name it. If they've conquered it and they don't completely see it as a threat like, say, Klingons, they've integrated it into the Imperial Starfleet. So quite rarely for this, I think we're going to see at least a limited mobilization of auxiliary assets of the Teran Empire. Perhaps the Andorian Imperial Guard, maybe the Vulcan Navy, and perhaps even other light assets from some of the other races like the Betazoids and Bolians, that although it's not confirmed, they're likely part of the Empire. At the very least, these powers will be forced to support the Terrans, either in personnel aboard the Imperial Starfleet vessels, or more likely in sheer industrial raw materials, food, medicine, weapons, equipment and supplies to provide logistical support to Starfleet while it fields its battlements. The Scarans don't have the same good working relationship with a lot of races. They do, however, have the Charads, and the Charads often work as auxiliary shock troops along with the Scarans, so we're going to have to include them. If we're including the Starfleets, we're going to have to include the Charads too. Charads, again, are a humanoid species similar in proportions and strength to a human, but are notably very aggressive. I wouldn't think that a Charad has any advantage over a Terran. In fact, considering how disorganized and sort of mindlessly violent Charads are known to be, I think the Terrans are going to have an actual advantage in fighting them, but at the very least it's giving them something else to shoot at, while the Scarans are much more threatening, a much harder, more difficult target. Terran vessels one-on-one are not a match for the Scaran dreadnoughts until the Terran flagship, the Scaran, enters the field. It lays waste to every Scaran dreadnought that it encounters. Its shields and armour are practically impervious to anything but the most heavy ordnance at point-blank range from the Scaran vessels. But the Scaran keeps its distance. It's difficult to track and it's very fast. It's incredibly well shielded against detection, and as a result the Scarans are having difficulty finding this ship, as well as the Terrans. They've got it once, they can replicate some of the technologies of the Scaran and disseminate it amongst other ships, realizing what works. Terrans are not stupid, but neither are the Scarans. When it comes to war, both sides here are extremely vicious, extremely brutal. They will bombard every planet into submission on both sides, but we're seeing a 50-50 here, I think, for the early few months of the war. For every system the Terrans take, a system will be lost to the Scarans. And until that kind of a stalemate can be broken, this is how the war is going to continue. And my prediction would be it would continue like that for probably quite some time, perhaps years, 2, maybe 3 years, before, in a war of attrition, one side caves to the other. Now, both possess massive interstellar empires with huge industrial and resource potential to feed their war machines. So I think it's going to come down to who gets the upper hand, who gets lucky. One advantage Terrans have is they make good engineers, and Terrans, humans in particular, are known to build ships quickly. I think although the Scaran vessels are inflicting massive damage on the Teran Empire, and they're losing resources, ships, materials and manpower, so are the Scarans. And although I think the Terrans are losing more ships, and even though I think their navies are probably on a proportion at the beginning, once they rank up to a war footing, I don't think the Scarans have the numerical capability or the industrial output to produce vessels as large and complicated as the dreadnoughts in large enough numbers. By the time the Scarans, a couple of years into the war, realise this and maybe begin mass producing ships like the Decimator, it might have come too late. Starfleet will have already ramped up its production and even have drafted in other ships from the other auxiliary navies to help at least in the fortification of certain key locations across the Empire. And I think the Scarans will begin to lose forces faster, but I don't think either side will be capable of capitulation. After all, the Scarans only surrendered to the idea of peace at the hands of basically a wormhole weapon threatening to destroy everything in the galaxy, a madness weapon so insanely overpowered that it was the only thing capable of bringing this incredibly stubborn and violent race to heel. And I think the mycelial weapons based on the Scaran, although are nowhere near that powerful, are powerful enough to perhaps make the Scarans think twice about who they're fighting. But they are not going to capitulate. This will become a war of absolute 100% destruction of the other. Once the Terrans, though, manage to get their upper hand against the Scarans, they'll continue to persecute that war against them. As the Scarans retreat further and further, the Scarans will lose world after world. The Terrans will destroy every ship, every outpost, every colony, every world. They will even offer a membership in the Empire to member states of the Scaran Empire, which, quite frankly, as much as being part of the Terran Empire probably sucks, it's better than being ruled by the Scarans. Lesser of two evils. They will break them. The Charads will have fallen long before this, with the Charads being absolutely annihilated by the Terrans. The Terrans will unleash biogenetic warfare. Both sides will try this, but my feeling is Terrans, they've got the experience of this kind of weaponry on their side. And eventually, although the Scarans will not surrender, they will stubbornly go down to the last man and woman standing. They will eventually be driven all the way back to their home system, where they will be utterly annihilated by the Terrans, just like the Klingons were on Kronos, as the Terrans bombard the planet from orbit, killing billions, shooting down every ship that tries to escape. The same thing will happen with the Scaran homeworld. Every ship that tries to escape, destroyed, shot down and pursued if it manages to get away. The planet will be bombarded into submission, and even if it surrenders by this point, I don't think the Terrans are going to allow a surrender, because even the Klingons were allowed to surrender. But the Scarans represent a very different foe. One the Terrans find so completely inhuman that they will not be able to tolerate its continued existence. Out of fear of just how dangerous and how powerful they are, the Terrans are sore from this war. And just like has happened in the past, they've overextended. They're facing rebellions, they're facing mutinies, they've got Terran forces trying to usurp the Emperor's throne because the Emperor is seen as weak because they've overextended and basically squandered Starfleet's resources fighting this enemy. The Terrans are basically almost on their knees by the end of this war, but I think they've come out on top. And that is my basic conclusion of what a conflict would look like, at least how it would result, between the Terran Empire and the Scaran Empire from Star Trek and Farscape. Let me know in the comments below if you have a different opinion. or if you think the Scarrans will come out on top, or if you think the battle would go a different way, perhaps peace would be an option. Maybe the wonder weapons of the Terran Empire would be able to scare the Scarrans into submission, or perhaps the sheer viciousness of the Scarrans would actually make the Terrans quiver in their boots. It's possible. I wouldn't want to fight a Scarran. Have you seen one of those monsters? Let me know in the comment section below. Like, share and subscribe. And we're at the end of this video. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you for watching. Bye bye.